Hello, I'm Jerry Fort. Welcome to Jungle Jerry's Treehouse. Shall we finish part 2 of Magic Treehouse number 21, Civil War on Sunday by Mary Pope Osborne. All right. We start back on chapter 6, Keep Low. The wagon jerked and swayed as it bumped over the dry ground. Jack felt as though he were frying in the hot sunlight. Dust from the road filled his throat and eyes. I think I'm feeling the dust in my throat, too. The boom of cannons grew louder and louder. Jack heard popping sounds, too, like the noise of firecrackers. "What's that popping noise?" he shouted. Blinded by the dust and sunlight. "Musket fire," said Clara. Jack remembered that muskets were long, old-fashioned guns. "What are those flashes?" asked Annie. Jack tried to open his eyes and see what she was talking about. He saw bright flashes of light in the distance and puffs of smoke in the sky. "Cannon shells exploding," said Clara Barton. "Shells are like small bombs. They have ruined much farmland." Jack squinted at the passing countryside. The ground was filled with ugly holes. Long ditches were also cut through the fields. "Did the shells make those ditches too?" he asked. "No, those are trenches the soldiers dug for a battle," Clara said. "Each side digs their own. Day after day they sit in the trenches, firing their muskets at one another." Jack tried to imagine how terrible it would be to sit in a trench all day, waiting to be shot, or waiting to shoot someone else. "We have to get some water," said Clara. She drove the wagon to a narrow creek. A stream of water flowed downhill, running over rocks. The wagon came to a halt. Jack heard a whistling sound, then another. "Keep low," cried Clara. "What's that?" Jack asked. "Cannon fire," she said. Jack and Annie crouched down in the driver's seat. Jack felt a rush of panic. He pulled out their list. His hands were shaking as he read, "Be brave." "Oh, great," he thought. Another cannon shell whizzed overhead. Then another. The ground exploded over and over in flashes of light. Dirt clods flew everywhere. Clouds of smoke and more dust filled the air. The horses neighed and whinnied. "Be brave," Jack thought. "Be brave." Chapter 7, Helping Hands. The firing came to an end. The horses calmed down. The smoky air began to clear. Clara handed Jack and Annie each a canteen. "Fill these quickly," she said. "We have no time to waste." Jack's legs felt wobbly as he followed Annie to the creek. They filled their canteens, then climbed back into the wagon. "Keep alert," said Clara. "Look for the wounded as they come off the battlefield." She snapped the reins. The horses started off again. As they bumped along, Jack looked ahead for wounded soldiers. "There," said Annie. She pointed to a man limping toward them and waving his arms. The man looked very young, more like a teenage boy. His uniform was torn and bloody. It wasn't a blue uniform, though. It was gray. Clara pulled the horses to a stop. "But he's a Confederate soldier," said Jack. "When someone is hurt, you give them a helping hand, no matter who they are," said Clara. Her voice got softer. "I have seen courage and kindness on both sides of this war. Sometimes things are not as simple as they seem." Jack was glad they had stopped to help the soldier. He jumped out of the wagon. "Do you need a helping hand?" he asked the young man. "Thank you," the soldier said softly. Jack helped him into the back of the wagon. The soldier lay down on a pile of blankets and closed his eyes. Jack climbed back onto the seat beside Clara. She snapped the reins and they rode on. They came across more ragged men resting in the shade of an oak tree. These soldiers all wore blue uniforms. Again, Clara stopped the horses. "See if any of those men need a ride to the hospital," she said to Jack and Annie. Jack glanced at the soldier sleeping in the back of the wagon. "Can a Confederate and a Union soldier be together?" he asked worriedly. Clara nodded. "Sometimes men are simply too sick and tired to be enemies anymore," she said. Sometimes they even know each other. Many families and friendships have been torn apart by this war." "Let's go," said Annie, hopping out of the wagon. Jack followed her. They carried their canteens to the men under the oak tree. "Hi," said Annie. "Does anyone need to go to the hospital?" "Only John, our drummer boy," a soldier said. "He's suffering from heat stroke, but we all need some water, miss." Jack saw a young boy lying on the ground. His eyes were closed. "Oh, Jack," whispered Annie, "he looks just like you." The boy did look a lot like Jack, just a few years older. "We better get into Clara's ambulance right away," Annie said. She handed her canteen to one of the tired soldiers. Another soldier lifted the drummer boy to his feet. The boy opened his eyes and mumbled a few words. He tried to walk, but he swayed as if he were about to faint. "Wait," Jack grabbed the boy. We'll give you a helping hand," he said. The drummer boy put his arms around Jack's and Annie's shoulders. "Just a little further, John," Annie said. "You're doing great. Just a little further." The drummer boy moved as if he were walking in his sleep. His head hung down. His feet shuffled in the dust. "Take good care of him," one of the men called. "We can't do without him." Chapter 8. Brothers. Clara Barton had turned the wagon around. She helped Jack and Annie lift the drummer boy into the back. The soldier said he has heat stroke. Annie told Clara his name is John. The boy lay down next to the sleeping Confederate soldier. "He does have heat stroke," Clara said. "The other boy also has a high fever. We must get them to the hospital at once. Can you two stay in the back of the wagon and do as I tell you?" "Sure," said Jack and Annie. Clara dampened 2 clean cloths with water from Jack's canteen. "Gently press these cloths against their faces to help cool them off," she said. She gave the cloths to Jack and Annie. Then she went to the front of the wagon and climbed in. The wagon started forward. Jack and Annie gently patted the soldiers' faces with the damp cloths. Jack looked at the young men lying side by side. The two seemed far more alike than different. In another time and place, they might have been friends, Jack thought. Finally, the wagon arrived at the field hospital. The Confederate soldier was put on a stretcher and carried to a tent. 2 soldiers wearing bandages put the drummer boy on a stretcher. "Could you stay with John a while?" Clara Barton asked Jack and Annie. "Sure," said Jack. "Try to bring down his fever," Clara said. "A nurse will give you ice packs to press against his skin. Find me when his fever is lower." The drummer boy was carried into an empty tent. Jack and Annie followed. John was put on a cot. Then a nurse brought some rags and a bucket filled with ice. Jack and Annie were left alone with the boy. Jack wrapped some ice in a rag. He pressed the ice pack against the boy's head and neck and arms. Annie fanned the air to cool John off and keep the flies away. Keep away the flies. Jack felt so hot, he pressed an ice pack against his own face for a moment. Then he looked up drummer boys in his Civil War book. He read, "The Civil War was the last war to use drummer boys. The drum beat was used to give orders to soldiers. Different beats told them when to eat, how to march, and even how to fight. On smoky battlefields, The boys' drumming helped soldiers find one another and keep together. Wow, said Jack. He closed the book, pulled out his notebook, and wrote, "Drummer boy, dash, really important job." Suddenly, John shouted. Jack looked up from his notebook. The drummer boy was still asleep, but he was waving his arms as if he were having a nightmare. Annie shook the boy's arm. "Wake up, John," she said. "You're okay. Wake up." The drummer boy opened his eyes. "You were having a bad dream," said Annie. "You're safe now. You'll see your family again soon." "No, no," the boy said. He sounded frantic. "I have to go back to the battlefield." "No, you don't have to fight anymore," said Annie. "You can go home and be safe." "No," the boy said. "They need me. They need my drum." He sounded more and more upset. Jack thought about their list. "Put aside your own feelings," he remembered. "Okay, John," said Jack. "You can go back as soon as you feel better." "Jack," said Annie, "he'll get hurt or killed. I'm afraid for him." "Me too," Jack said softly. "But we have to put our own feelings aside. That's one of the things on our list." Annie sighed. "Okay," she said sadly. She looked at John. "If you want to fight again in the Civil War, you can. If that's what you really want." "Thank you," the boy whispered. "You know you're the bravest kid I've ever met," Jack said. The drummer boy smiled at Jack. "You look just like my little brother," he said hoarsely. "You look just like my big brother," said Jack. "Except I don't have a big brother. I don't have any brothers." The three of them laughed. The drummer boy's laugh was very soft. The boy laid his head back on his pillow and closed his eyes again. In a moment he was sleeping peacefully. A smile was on his lips. Annie felt his forehead. "His fever's gone down," she said. "We should go tell Clara." Annie left the tent. Jack got up and slowly followed her. When he reached the entrance of the tent, he turned and looked back. The shadows of the twilight fell across the boy's calm, sleeping face. It was strange. Jack hardly knew the drummer boy, but he felt they could be brothers. Listening to the cannon fire in the distance, Jack was afraid for the boy. Will he live to see his family again? Jack wondered. "Good luck, John," Jack said softly. With a heavy heart, Jack stepped out into the warm evening air. Chapter 9. Don't Give Up. "Annie," said Jack. "Over here," she called. Jack saw two figures standing in the twilight. He walked over to Annie and Clara. They all stared in the direction of the distant battlefield. Bright lights flashed against the dark blue horizon, cannon shells exploding. Every time you see a flash, you know a shell may have taken a life or many lives, said Clara. Excuse me. "That's awful," said Annie. "Yes, it is," said Clara. "A whole world can vanish in that flash. All a young man's joys and sorrows, all his memories. This is a cruel war," said Annie. "All wars are cruel," said Clara Barton. "People feel they must fight for causes they believe in, but they soon discover that war is not about glory and fame. It's about misery and terrible pain and sadness." "It makes me miss my mom and dad," said Annie. "It makes me really miss them." Annie sounded tired and homesick. Finally, she had lost her cheerfulness. "I think it's time for you two to go home," said Clara. Jack thought of all the wounded men who needed food and water and kindness and comfort. "No," Jack said. "We have to stay. We can't give up. That's on the list. Don't give up." Jack pulled out their list to show Clara Barton. "Oh, yes," she said, nodding. "I see one of my nurses has written down the things I often say. Let me add one thing more. Do not forget the ones who love you." Jack heaved a big sigh. He was homesick, too. "Can we keep the list?" he asked. "Of course," said Clara. "You don't have to work in a hospital to follow my words. They work in all of life, no matter where you go, sorry." "Thanks," said Jack. My thanks to both of you, said Clara Barton. You were great helpers. You were a great teacher, said Annie. Goodbye, said Clara Barton. Be very careful going home. We will, said Jack and Annie. Bye. The sun was setting as they walked out of the camp. The boom of cannon sounded in the distance. Soldiers sang a song around a campfire. We're tenting tonight on the old campground. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home, a song of home, and friends we love so dear. Jack and Annie walked through the darkening field. By the time they reached the woods, the stars were out. They climbed up the rope ladder to the treehouse. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book. Wait, said Jack. He looked out the window. He couldn't see anything below, but the soldier's song still carried through the warm, starry night. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight. This is more of the song, wishing for the war to cease. As Jack listened, he thought of Clara Barton, the elderly slave, the young Confederate soldier, and John the drummer boy. War is not a game, Jack said softly. It is definitely not a game. Looks like this is more of the song. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. The song ended. The cannon fire stopped. The night was quiet, except for the croaking of frogs. Ready? Annie whispered. Ready, said Jack. I really wish we could go home, Annie said, pointing to the picture of the Frog Creek woods. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. Home Sweet Home. There was a booming in the distance. Jack opened his eyes and caught his breath. Is that cannon fire? He wondered. Are we still back in the Civil War? We're home, said Annie. Home, sweet home. Oh, man, Jack whispered. They were home. They were back in the Frog Creek woods. They were wearing their own comfortable clothes again. The cannon fire was really only thunder. At that moment, Jack loved the thunder. Raindrops tapped against the treehouse. We better hurry, said Jack. Wait, leave the list in the treehouse, said Annie. It's the first special writing for Morgan's library. Something to follow. Jack took the list of Clara Barton's rules out of his pack. He put it on the floor next to Morgan's letter. I wonder how that list will help save Camelot, he said. I don't know, said Annie, but you know what's weird about getting that list? I think we couldn't just have taken it home when we first got it. We had to live it first. Jack nodded. Annie was completely right, he thought. He picked up his backpack. Wait, I see another note, said Annie. She picked a piece of paper off the treehouse floor. On it was written, "Come back on Wednesday." I guess that's when Morgan wants us to look for the next special writing, said Annie. That's in 3 days, said Jack. Let's go home and rest. He started down the rope ladder. Annie followed. When they stepped onto the ground, the rain began to pour down. Run, said Jack. They ran through the Frog Creek woods, then down their street. They ran to their porch and dashed into their dry, cozy house. They found their parents reading in the living room. Dad, Mom, Annie cried. We're so glad to see you. Well, we're glad to see you too, their dad said, sounding a little puzzled. More like, well, we're glad to see you too, their dad said, sounding a little puzzled. Go put on your dry clothes, their mom said. Jack and Annie started up to their rooms. Halfway up the stairs, Jack stopped. Oh, I have a question, he called to his parents. Did anyone in our family fight in the Civil War? Their dad looked surprised. Yes, he said. One of your great-great-great-grandfathers was a drummer boy. Ooh, I just got goosebumps on my arms. That just tripped me out. Oh, man, whispered Jack. What was his name? Dad? Asked Annie. John, their dad said. Jack and Annie gasped. And what happened to John? Jack asked. Was he hurt in the war? No, he grew up to be a school teacher, their mom said. He had 5 children. Jack and Annie whooped with joy. That's great news, said Annie. Really great news, said Jack. Thanks for telling us. Sure, their dad smiled, though he looked puzzled again. As Jack hurried up to his room, some words from the Civil War song ran through his mind. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home. Whoop. All right. You want to hear a few facts for you and Jack? Number 1. More soldiers were killed in the Civil War than any other war in American history. Number 2. In 1861, when the Civil War began, about 3.5 million people were slaves in the South. Number 3. In 1865, President Abraham Lincoln convinced Congress to pass the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which abolished slavery throughout the nation. Number 4. 11 states fought for the Confederacy. 23 states fought for the Union. A number of territories also fought for the Union. Number 5. Soldiers during the Civil War often sang songs together. One of the most famous songs was Tenting Tonight on the Old Campground, written in 1861 by Walter Kittredge. Tenting tonight on the old campground. Oh, here's the song. You want to hear it? We're tenting tonight on the old campground. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home and field and friends we love so dear. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. We've been tenting tonight on the old campground, thinking of days gone by, of the loved ones at home that gave us the hand and the tear that said goodbye. Huh. Clara Barton, known as the Angel of the Battlefield, nursed soldiers during the Civil War. She also used her own money to bring them supplies. I think I read this in the beginning. I can't remember for sure. After the war, she formed a bureau to search for soldiers who were missing as a result of the war. Her work brought information to more than 22,000 families. So this is kind of different. In 1881, Clara Barton founded the American Red Cross. Well, I didn't know that. Her organization not only provides relief during times of war, but also helps people who have suffered terrible natural disasters, such as hurricanes or floods. Drummer boys. It is thought that nearly 60,000 boys served as drummer boys or buglers in the Civil War. One of the youngest drummer boys was Johnny Clem, who enlisted at the age of 11. Wow. He was so brave that he was made a sergeant when he was only 13. Wow. That was pretty interesting. Okay. Number 22. That's the next one. Revolutionary War on Wednesday, another war. By Mary Pope Osborne. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Excuse me. And we will see you all on the next story. Bye.